The Barber Paradox. Imagine a village with exactly one barber. Every man who does not shave himself goes to him for a shave, and only those men. Each morning, before dawn, he straps on his leather apron, sharpens his straight razor, and lights a single lantern in the back of his shop. He knows his rule perfectly: shave only those who cannot shave themselves. He begins by lathering a customer's stubble, gliding the blade with steady precision. A rhythm emerges: lather, shave, rinse. The hum of a distant rooster reminds him of the rare simplicity of his work. Yet, tucked at the edge of that simplicity lies a hidden snag. When his shift ends, he turns to his own reflection, razor in hand, ready to complete his day's duty on himself. If he shaves himself, he breaks his own rule, because he only shaves men who do not shave themselves. If he does not shave himself, he must shave himself, because he shaves every man who doesn't. His mind loops endlessly. Each thought of picking up the razor circles back to its opposite. He cannot finish without contradiction. He cannot avoid without contradiction. The very rule that guides him traps him instead. This perplexing puzzle first gained attention in the early 20th century, when British philosopher and logician Bertrand Russell stumbled upon it while exploring the foundations of mathematics. Russell encountered a similar contradiction in set theory: the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. If that set contains itself, it contradicts its definition. If it does not, it contradicts it anyway. To bring this abstract conflict into human terms, he crafted the Barber story, a concrete scenario that reveals the fragile limits of self-referential rules. Picture the barber's shop in vivid detail. Outside, a striped pole turns slowly in the morning breeze. A wooden sign creaks on its hinge, announcing "Barber." Inside, warm amber light pools on polished floorboards. Shelves line the walls, filled with glass jars of scented oils and shaving brushes. The barber's chair, red leather cracked with age, faces an oval mirror framed in carved oak. The mirror glints as he smooths each customer's cheek. Now imagine the moment after the last customer. The lantern's flame flickers gently. He washes his hands, steps back to the mirror, and raises his razor. The lantern reflects twice: the barber in the foreground and his duplicate behind the glass. He leans in, thinking of the rule that governs his every shave. Time seems to slow. The blade hovers an inch from skin. The logic puzzle unfurls in his mind. This paradox challenges more than a village rule. It exposes the hidden complexities in any system that refers to itself. We trust definitions to neatly divide the world: those who do, those who do not. Yet when a rule applies to itself, the neat categories collapse. The barber's dilemma shows that even common-sense instructions can unravel when they point back at themselves. Beyond the barber's razor, self-reference emerges across language, mathematics, and technology. In everyday speech, consider the liar paradox. This sentence is false. If it's true, it's false. If it's false, it's true. In computer science, a recursive function without a base case spins endlessly or crashes. In law, a rule that applies to itself can render statutes unenforceable. Wherever systems reflect on their own rules, a hidden fault line may appear. Reflect on the barber's hesitation. He settles onto the cool leather chair, razor poised. Each breath is steady. Inhale, exhale. Logic loops in his mind as he restrains the blade. He lowers his elbows to his sides. He studies his own eyes in the mirror, searching for a loophole. None appears. The lantern's glow warms his face, but offers no solution. This silent standoff reminds us of the limits of rational thought. We build rules to bring order. We expect them to guide us forward. Yet when a rule encompasses itself, it can reflect us back into confusion. The Barber Paradox teaches caution. Avoid self-referential definitions unless you want your system to trap you in a loop. Allow this thought to drift through your awareness as you rest. Imagine the barber's gentle pause, the calm glow of his lantern, the silent hum of the shop. Feel your own breath align with his. Inhale, exhale, repeat. Logical loops may swirl, but your mind can find stillness. Let the barber lower his razor and step away, leaving only the quiet amber light, and let your thoughts settle into peaceful sleep. The Ship of Theseus. Imagine a majestic wooden ship revered by the Athenians in honor of their hero Theseus. Each year, as the planks grew worn and weathered, the citizens replaced a single piece, board by board, until, over decades, every original timber had been swapped. Yet they continued to call it the Ship of Theseus, parading it across the Aegean Sea in grand festivals. At what point did it cease to be the same ship? If identity depends on material substance, the vessel with no original planks cannot be Theseus's ship. If identity depends on form and continuity, it remains the same, despite every replacement. Plutarch first recorded this practice in his Life of Theseus. He described how Athenians, devoted to tradition, preserved their connection to the past through an unbroken ritual. The paradox arises when we question what makes an object itself, its matter or its function and history. We expect objects to persist through change, yet when every part is replaced, substance disappears, leaving only the idea of continuity. Centuries later, philosopher Thomas Hobbes deepened the puzzle with a provocative scenario. He imagined collecting every discarded plank and reconstructing them into a second vessel, an identical Ship of Theseus formed entirely from original timber. Now, two ships exist, the continuously restored vessel sailing with unbroken use, and the reconstructed ship preserving the original matter. Which of these is the real Ship of Theseus? The Athenians would point to the one with uninterrupted history, yet the replica boasts the authentic wood. Hobbes's thought experiment exposes two competing intuitions: identity as continuity of form versus identity as persistence of material. Modern philosophers offer varied approaches to resolve the paradox. Durantists view objects as four-dimensional entities composed of temporal parts. Each moment of the ship's existence is a slice in time, so the vessel remains the same across replacements. Endurantists argue that objects wholly exist at each instant, maintaining identity if form and function remain consistent. Deflationists suggest the paradox arises from linguistic confusion. Ship can refer to a set of planks or to the functional vessel. By clarifying usage, they claim the puzzle dissolves. Beyond ancient vessels, the Ship of Theseus resonates in everyday life. Consider personal identity. Our bodies regenerate most of their cells every 7 to 10 years, yet we feel we remain the same person. Cognitive scientists liken us to the ship. Physical substance flows continuously, but our identity emerges from memory, personality, and narrative. In computer science, recursive algorithms require a base case to avoid infinite loops, much like rules that refer to themselves without clear boundaries. In legal and ethical debates, the paradox echoes loudly. Patent offices must decide if a modified invention retains its original identity, affecting intellectual property rights. Environmental scientists ask whether a forest regrown after wildfire is the same ecosystem, since soil, species, and structure evolve over time. In each case, we wrestle with continuity through change, asking what anchors identity when material and form diverge. Visualize the restored ship at dawn. Its hull gleams under pale light, each plank fresh yet familiar. Sailors board with anticipation, retracing footsteps of legends. Beside it, in shadowed harbor, the reconstructed ship waits, timber aged and marked by history. Two vessels share a name and story, yet each embodies a different notion of sameness. The Ship of Theseus teaches that identity is rarely a simple matter of material. It rests in continuity of purpose, communal recognition, and narrative coherence. We craft definitions and rules to bring order, but when those rules turn back on themselves, they can trap us in endless loops of contradiction. Allow this reflection to drift through your thoughts. Picture each replaced plank as a moment in time, each wave against the hull as breath in your chest. Though the paradox swirls, your breathing remains calm and steady. Let the gentle rocking of philosophical inquiry carry you softly into peaceful sleep. The Grandfather Paradox. Imagine you build a time machine and travel back to your grandparents' youth, determined to witness history firsthand. You arrive before your grandfather meets your grandmother, an ordinary day in an earlier era. Disguised in period attire, you navigate cobbled streets and vintage shops until you find him as a young man. You plan only observation, but curiosity grips you. In an accidental scuffle or a moment of panic, you intervene and prevent his meeting with your grandmother. Suddenly, the chain of events leading to your own existence unravels. If your grandfather never marries, your parent is never born, and consequently, you are never born to construct the time machine and journey back. This loop traps cause and effect in contradiction. The Grandfather Paradox emerged in early 20th century discussions of time travel, notably in René Barjavel's 1943 novel, Future Times 3, where a traveler kills his grandmother as a child. Philosophers and physicists later adopted the scenario to expose logical inconsistencies in theories permitting backward time travel. It forces us to question whether past, present, and future can truly coexist, or if the very notion of altering history defies reason. Consider the scenario in detail. You activate your machine, stepping into a sepia-toned world. The hum of the engine fades. You walk down a narrow lane, aware that each footstep echoes centuries of ancestors. You spot your grandfather conversing with friends. Heart pounding, you approach. A misstep, spilled drink, harsh words. Suddenly, he changes course and never meets your grandmother. You return to the present, but the lab is empty. No colleagues, no time machine, no you. The moment you altered the past, you erased your own path. Physicists propose safeguards against such contradictions. Einstein's general relativity allows solutions with closed, time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves, suggesting time travel might be mathematically possible. Yet, quantum mechanics introduces probabilistic events that could prevent macroscopic paradoxes. The Novikov self-consistency principle posits that any action by a time traveler was always part of history. You would never succeed in preventing your own birth, as events would conspire to uphold consistency. Another resolution lies in the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. When you alter the past, you branch into a parallel universe. In this new timeline, your grandparents never marry, and you never exist. But your original timeline remains intact. You, the traveler, inhabit this alternate reality. However, this raises philosophical questions about personal identity. If you continue in a universe where your history never occurred, are you still truly yourself? Beyond science fiction, the paradox resonates in programming and logic. Recursive functions, code that calls itself, must include a base case or risk infinite loops and system crashes. The Grandfather Paradox mirrors a faulty recursive call lacking termination. You attempt to remove your own origin, causing the process to loop endlessly or fail. Storytellers exploit these ideas for dramatic effect. Ray Bradbury's A Sound of Thunder shows how small changes ripple through time. Films like Back to the Future dramatize near misses. Marty McFly almost erases himself, but ultimately restores history. These narratives reflect our deep intuition. Identity and existence rely on a stable temporal foundation, and tampering risks unraveling reality. Reflect on your own life as you consider this paradox. Each heartbeat depends on moments before, decisions, relationships, chance encounters. If you could revisit one scene and change it, would you dare? And if you did, would you still be here to recall the change? The Grandfather Paradox reminds us that our existence hinges on unbroken chains of cause and effect. Allow this thought experiment to drift through your mind as you settle into rest. Picture an hourglass of time, its sand flowing upward and downward in an endless dance. The older you in the top chamber, the younger you below, linked by the perpetual stream. Breathe in, breathe out, and let the paradox's mystery lull you into peaceful sleep. The liar paradox is famously encapsulated by a single sentence. This sentence is false. At first glance, it seems like a clever play on words until you try to apply truth or falsehood. If the sentence is true, then what it asserts must hold. It is false. But if it is false, then its assertion fails, meaning it must be true. This immediate flip-flop traps logic in a loop. Neither truth nor falsehood can consistently apply. This puzzle dates back to the 4th century BCE, credited to the Greek philosopher Eubulides of Miletus. He posed it as a challenge to our understanding of language and truth. Aristotle, in his Metaphysics, referred to such self-referential statements as puzzling, recognizing that ordinary speech can break down when it turns back on itself. Every utterance of the liar paradox forces us to confront the boundaries of meaning. Imagine an ancient scroll unfurled on a wooden desk, candlelight flickering across the parchment. The words, "This sentence is false," are inked in bold characters, each stroke deliberate. A scholar reads it aloud. "This sentence is false." He lowers his head, strokes his beard, and considers. If he calls it true, he must immediately declare it false, and if false, he must declare it true. The paradox swirls in the dim light, a silent riddle that offers no answer. Medieval logicians and Renaissance thinkers wrestled with the liar paradox for centuries. Some proposed a third category, suggesting such statements are neither true nor false. Others embraced four-valued logic, allowing statements to be true, false, both, or neither. These expansions of classical Aristotelian logic create room for statements that defy binary classification, acknowledging that some utterances resist neat labeling. In the 20th century, logician Kurt Gödel built on these insights in his incompleteness theorems. He constructed a mathematical statement akin to "this statement is not provable." If the system proves it, the statement is false, and if it does not, the statement is true. Gödel's work showed that any sufficiently powerful formal system contains true statements that cannot be proven within itself, echoing the self-referential loop of the liar paradox on a grander scale. Modern philosophers continue to explore solutions. Contextualists argue that the sentence's truth value depends on context, who speaks it, and when. Hierarchical theories place statements in levels, so a statement about truth must refer only to a lower level, avoiding direct self-reference. Paraconsistent logics accept some contradictions without collapsing into incoherence, permitting the liar paradox to coexist with useful reasoning. Beyond academic debate, self-referential paradoxes appear in everyday conversation. "I never trust myself," or "I always lie." Such remarks spark the same mental loop, playful yet unsettling. In programming, developers guard against infinite recursion, the software equivalent of a liar paradox, by defining clear base cases so functions stop calling themselves endlessly. Consider how this applies to human belief. What happens when we hold conflicting views about ourselves? A desire to change and a craving for comfort at once. Our minds can loop through doubts and resolutions, much like the liar paradox. Therapists help navigate these loops by distinguishing between thoughts and facts, preventing clients from becoming trapped in self-referential spirals. Reflect on that flickering scroll once more. Picture each letter etched in glowing ink, the paradox alive in its silent message. Let the tension between true and false wash over your thoughts without demanding resolution. Breathe in, breathe out. As the candle gutter dies down, find calm in the space between contradiction and comprehension. Allow the liar paradox to drift into your subconscious. It may loop endlessly, but your breath remains steady and serene. In this quiet, restful state, your mind can settle, preparing you for peaceful sleep. Zeno's Achilles and the Tortoise. Imagine a race between legendary warrior Achilles and a slow-moving tortoise. Achilles, confident in his speed, grants the tortoise a 10-pace head start. At the starting signal, Achilles surges forward, powerful muscles propelling him down the track. Yet according to the ancient Eleatic philosopher Zeno, Achilles can never overtake the tortoise. By the time Achilles reaches the tortoise's original starting point, the tortoise has moved forward. When Achilles covers that new distance, the tortoise advances again. Achilles must then reach that next point, by which time the tortoise crawls ahead once more. This process repeats infinitely. Achilles always closes one gap, only to find another smaller one remaining. In theory, he must complete infinitely many tasks, suggesting motion itself is impossible. Zeno formalized this paradox around 450 BCE to defend his teacher Parmenides' claim that change and plurality are illusions. Zeno crafted several puzzles based on infinite division, achieving surprising contradictions when everyday concepts like motion, space, and time are examined at infinity. Achilles and the Tortoise endures as the most famous, illustrating that simple assumptions can yield absurd conclusions if pushed to extremes. Picture the dusty racecourse. White markers etched into earth at regular intervals. The tortoise stands atop the first marker, shell-patterned and mottled. Achilles crouches at the starting line, gaze fixed ahead. A hush falls before the signal. When the horn sounds, Achilles rockets forward, leaving behind a blur of dust. The tortoise begins its steady crawl, slow but relentless. Achilles passes the first marker in a heartbeat, yet the tortoise has inched forward. Achilles crosses the second marker. The tortoise has crawled again, and so on, ad infinitum. Aristotle later tackled this paradox by distinguishing potential from actual infinity. He argued that although we can divide spaces and times endlessly, in theory, potential infinity, the distances are covered in finite time, actual completion. In modern mathematics, the concept of infinite series and limits resolves the puzzle. If Achilles runs 10 meters per second and the tortoise 1 meter per second with a 10-meter lead, the distances Achilles must cover form a series like 10 plus 1 plus 0.1 plus 0.01, etc., which converges to approximately 11.111 meters. Achilles overtakes the tortoise in roughly 1.1111 seconds, despite the infinite subdivisions. Calculus, developed by Newton and Leibniz in the 17th century, provided formal tools to sum infinitely many terms and calculate precise limits. Yet the importance of Zeno's paradox goes beyond mathematics. It highlights our intuitive resistance to the concept of infinity. It reminds us that even seemingly straightforward ideas, like running a race, can conceal profound mysteries. In physics, the paradox resonates with questions about continuity. Modern quantum theory shows particles behave both as waves and discrete quanta, challenging classical notions of motion. In Einstein's relativity, space and time interweave, altering how we conceive distance and duration. Zeno's challenge persists. Our everyday intuition must adapt to deeper truths about the fabric of reality. Cognitive science offers another perspective. Human perception assembles smooth motion from discrete snapshots. Our brains fill in the gaps, so we experience continuous movement. We do not notice Achilles pausing at each marker. Instead, we simply see him overtake the tortoise. This reveals the brain's remarkable ability to resolve logical infinities unconsciously. Beyond academic debate, the race serves as metaphor for human pursuits. We set goals and milestones. Each achieved milestone reveals another horizon. Like Achilles chasing the tortoise, we advance through countless small steps, yet reach our objectives if we persist. Each marker symbolizes progress and possibility. As you reflect on this paradox, picture Achilles striding powerfully, the tortoise unwavering in its crawl, and the infinite markers stretching ahead. Let the rhythm of relentless pursuit and the resolution of infinite tasks drift through your mind. In the quiet of night, breathe steadily. Inhale, exhale, and let the steady pulse of inquiry carry you toward restful sleep. The Sorites Heap Paradox. Imagine a single grain of sand on a solid black background, tiny, unremarkable, and by itself clearly not a heap. Now picture two grains resting side by side. Still not a heap. Add a third grain, a fourth, a fifth. With each additional grain, the pile grows gradually, yet imperceptibly. At what precise moment does it become a heap? If one grain short of a heap is still not a heap, and adding a single grain to something that isn't a heap cannot suddenly transform it into one, then by that logic, no number of grains ever forms a heap. Yet everyone knows that a large pile of sand undeniably qualifies as a heap. This tension between logical reasoning and everyday intuition is the Sorites paradox. The term Sorites comes from the ancient Greek word for heap, and the paradox was first introduced by the philosopher Eubulides of Miletus around the 4th century BCE. Eubulides used this puzzle to highlight problems in our language. Words like bald, tall, or heap lack clear boundaries. We recognize when someone is bald or not bald based on context, but we cannot specify exactly how many hairs define bald. Similarly, we see a lone grain is not a heap and a mountain of sand is. Yet we cannot pinpoint the exact transitional point. Let's examine the reasoning step by step. Premise 1. One grain of sand does not make a heap. Premise 2. For any number n, if n grains do not make a heap, then n plus 1 grains also do not make a heap. From these two statements alone, logic forces us to conclude that 2 grains are not a heap, 3 grains are not a heap, and so on, forever. Yet observationally, 1,000 grains clearly form a heap. How can logic and experience both be right? Over centuries, philosophers have proposed various responses. Sharp cutoff solution. Define an exact number, say 1,000 grains, where the pile becomes a heap. Below that, it isn't. At or above, it is. While resolving the paradox, this feels arbitrary. Why choose 1,000 instead of 900 or 1,100? Many valued logic. Move beyond true or false and allow intermediate truth values. A pile of 100 grains might be 0.2 heap, while 10,000 grains is 0.8 heap. This mirrors our gradual sense of classification, but diverges from binary logic. Vagueness as a feature. Accept that some terms are inherently vague. Words like heap serve practical communication without precise definitions. The paradox warns against demanding exactness from everyday language. In the 17th century, with the advent of calculus, mathematicians introduced limits and infinite series to handle infinite processes. Just as Zeno's Achilles covers infinitely many shrinking distances in finite time, we can see that a heap emerges once the count crosses a practical threshold, even if logic alone cannot pinpoint it exactly. In modern semantics, supervaluationism treats borderline cases as indeterminate. Statements about heaps may be neither true nor false. Contextualism recognizes that context determines cutoff points. A heap at a sandpit looks different from a heap on a beach. These approaches embrace the fluidity of language. Beyond philosophy and mathematics, the Sorites paradox appears in daily life. Age, turning 64, does not make you old, and turning 65 might not either. Yet at some point, we all accept old as a label. Savings, depositing $1 extra doesn't turn not comfortable into comfortable, but gradually it does. Performance ratings, a score of 79 is passing, 80 is good. Why does 1 point matter so much? Researchers in cognitive science show our brains handle vagueness by relying on prototypes and context. We categorize based on overall patterns rather than strict boundaries, allowing us to function smoothly despite logical paradoxes. In computer science, threshold functions decide when systems switch states, like a thermostat turning on when the temperature exceeds 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Engineers set such cutoffs based on safety or comfort, knowing that real-world signals are never perfectly precise. Reflect on that lone grain of sand. Envision piles growing into the distance, each mound only slightly larger than the last. Feel the gradual accumulation, grain by grain, mirroring your steady breaths. Inhale 1 moment, exhale the next. Neither alone changes much, yet together they sustain life. Allow the Sorites paradox to drift through your mind as you settle into rest. Logic may challenge you to find a precise boundary, but your subconscious can rest in the gentle ambiguity. Let the steady rhythm of thought, ever so slight, ever so continuous, carry you toward peaceful sleep. The Russell's Paradox. Imagine a library that catalogs every imaginable collection of books. One day, the librarian decides to create a special shelf, the shelf of all collections that do not include themselves. Every collection that isn't already stored on that shelf gets added. As long as a collection doesn't contain itself, it finds its place here. Yet a puzzling question arises. Should the shelf itself be included? If the shelf of non-self-containing collections does include itself, then by definition, it must not include itself. But if it doesn't include itself, then it qualifies for inclusion, and thus must include itself. The moment we ask, does this shelf belong on itself? Logic loops back in contradiction. This is Russell's paradox, the query of whether the set of all sets that do not contain themselves contains itself. In 1901, British philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell uncovered this paradox while examining foundational principles of set theory. Mathematicians had long assumed that any well-defined property could determine a set. Russell's discovery shattered that assumption, showing that some collections, those that refer to themselves, break the very rules meant to govern them. His insight exposed a fundamental flaw in the naive conception of sets. Picture a grand study lined with tall oak shelves, each labeled with headings like all novels, all poetry, and all books by Dr. Smith. The librarian strolls in, quill in hand, ready to sort books into the new, non-self-referential collections shelf. He examines each shelf. If a shelf's label doesn't mention itself, he copies its entire contents onto the new shelf. He pauses before the very shelf he's creating. He glances at his reflection in a polished globe light. He hesitates. The simple act of deciding whether to include the shelf traps him in an endless loop of doubt. Russell formalized this in a letter to Gottlob Frege, demonstrating that the unrestricted comprehension principle, for any property there is a set of all things satisfying that property, leads to contradiction. Frege's system, widely regarded as the foundation of modern logic, collapsed under this paradox. Russell's work prompted mathematicians to rebuild set theory on more careful axioms, such as Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, which restrict how sets can be formed. Beyond abstract mathematics, Russell's paradox reverberates through logic and computer science. In programming, an analogy appears when a function calls itself without a clear base case. Such recursive functions must include a termination condition. Without it, the program enters an infinite loop or crashes. Likewise, defining a data structure that includes itself without guardrails leads to unresolvable reference loops. In philosophy, the paradox challenges our understanding of self-reference in language. Sentences like "this sentence is unprovable" echo Russell's insight. Statements that talk about their own truth value can generate contradictions or demonstrate inherent limitations of formal systems. Kurt Gödel later built on these self-referential techniques to prove his incompleteness theorems, showing that in any sufficiently powerful mathematical system, there are true statements that cannot be proven within the system. Practical implications arise in database design and semantic web technologies. Ontologies, structured representations of knowledge, must avoid circular definitions that refer to themselves without clear hierarchy. Knowledge engineers implement safeguards to ensure that classes and subclasses do not create infinite loops of reference, preventing system failures and ensuring consistent data retrieval. The paradox also appears in legal reasoning. Laws that refer to themselves, such as "all statutes except those that reference this clause are valid," produce contradictions that defy enforcement. Jurists and lawmakers must craft statutes with precise language and consistent scope to avoid self-referential traps that render legislation meaningless. Reflect on that lone shelf in the study, labeled non-self-referential collections. See the quill poised above it, the librarian's brow furrowed as he contemplates inclusion. The library's silent corridors press in, filled with the weight of countless volumes. Each shelf stands in quiet anticipation, awaiting its fate. Russell's paradox teaches a vital lesson. Systems that allow unrestricted self-reference can collapse under the weight of their own definitions. Whether in mathematics, computer science, language, or law, we must impose clear boundaries, axioms, base cases, or hierarchical structures to preserve consistency and avoid logical disaster. Let this paradox drift into your thoughts as you settle into rest. Picture the library's rows fading into darkness, the quill lowered at last, the shelves standing in silent stalemate. Breathe in, breathe out, and let the gentle place of unresolved inquiry guide you toward peaceful sleep. The Bootstrap Paradox. Imagine you discover a time machine hidden in your attic. Curious, you step inside and travel 50 years into the future. There, you find a dusty, leather-bound book lying open on a pedestal. Its pages glow faintly, inscribed with a groundbreaking scientific theory you've never heard of, one that revolutionized physics in the interim. You carefully copy the entire text by hand, then return to your own time and publish it under your name. Decades later, this same book becomes the source for the theory, and a young scientist adapts it into that glowing volume you discovered. But who, in fact, wrote the original theory? This looping mystery is the Bootstrap Paradox. The Bootstrap Paradox, also called the ontological paradox, arises when an object or piece of information travels back in time and becomes the very source of itself. No original author or inventor exists. The item is caught in a closed causal loop. In our example, the scientific theory has no true origin, You copy future work into the past. The future work is based on your past copy, and the cycle continues indefinitely. Discussions of such loops date to mid-20th century science fiction. Robert A. Heinlein's 1941 story, By His Bootstraps, introduced self-creating timelines, inspiring the paradox's name. Since then, writers and philosophers have explored scenarios where objects, designs, or information exist without genesis, caught in time travel circularity. Consider the mechanics of the loop. You enter the future lab and see the book by Dr. Elena Santos, famed for her theory on quantum tunneling. You return to 2025, publish the same work as your thesis. Researchers in 2050 cite your thesis as Santos's inspiration. Someone archives it in a museum, and 50 years later, you find it. The chain of custody has no starting point. The book's content simply is. It exists because it exists, without true creation. Physicists debate whether such loops violate fundamental laws. In classical general relativity, time-like curves permit closed loops through spacetime, theoretically allowing objects to revisit the past. Yet quantum mechanics introduces uncertainty that may forbid macroscopic paradoxes. Some theorists propose the Novikov self-consistency principle, asserting that only events consistent with history can occur, so loops cannot produce contradictions. Under this rule, you might find the book but fail to copy it correctly or lose it before publishing, preventing the paradox. Others turn to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. When you copy the book, you branch into a new timeline where the theory originates from your actions. The original timeline remains intact, containing Santos's independent work. Each branch has its own consistent history, avoiding causal loops. Yet this raises questions. Are you still you in a branch where your identity and work differ? Which timeline holds the real book? In philosophy, the Bootstrap Paradox exposes deep puzzles about causation and creation. How can something exist without an initial cause? Traditionally, objects and ideas have origins. An inventor crafts a device, and author pens a manuscript. In a loop, the notion of origin evaporates. The paradox challenges our understanding of beginnings and endings, suggesting that cause and effect can circle back on themselves. Similar loops appear in folklore and myth. A magic sword, passed down through generations, reappears at its own forging, carried by a hero who first found it. Legends of items without clear origins abound, hinting at human fascination with self-arising wonders. In literature, these stories captivate us because they break linear narratives, inviting reflection on time's nature. In technology, self-referential loops emerge in programming. A computer script that writes its own code and compiles itself embodies a digital analog of the Bootstrap Paradox. Without careful design, such self-modifying code can spiral into errors or infinite loops. Software engineers use strict version control and initialization protocols to prevent runaway self-reference. On a personal level, the paradox invites us to ponder our own ideas. Have we ever borrowed an insight that later seems to have arisen autonomously within us? Creative breakthroughs often feel circular. An artist recalls a dream, transforms it into art, and then finds that art inspires new dreams. Inspiration, like the paradox, can appear to loop without a clear starting spark. As you consider this looping mystery, picture the glowing book floating in midair, pages turning without hands. See the ghostly quill pen tracing letters that feed back into themselves, a perfect circle of creation. Feel the weightless wonder of an object born from its own existence, defying beginnings. Allow the Bootstrap Paradox to drift into your thoughts as you settle into rest. Imagine each word in the glowing volume folding back on itself, each letter a breath in your mind. Inhale curiosity, exhale calm. Let the self-sustaining loop of time travel fiction carry you gently to sleep. Schrödinger's cat paradox. Imagine a sealed metal pet carrier sitting on a solid black background, its door firmly shut, and a faint question mark overlaying its side. According to quantum mechanics, a radioactive atom inside the box has a 50% chance of decaying within an hour. If it decays, a Geiger counter triggers a vial of poison to break, ending the cat's life. If it does not, the cat remains alive. Until we open the box and observe, quantum theory tells us the atom exists in a superposition of decayed and not decayed states, and with it, the cat exists in a superposition of dead and alive. The moment before observation, the cat is neither wholly dead nor wholly alive, but both at once. This is Schrödinger's cat. Erwin Schrödinger proposed this thought experiment in 1935 to illustrate the oddity of applying quantum rules so successful at atomic scales to everyday objects. In his paper, he argued that if quantum superposition governed macroscopic items, absurd scenarios like a simultaneously living and dead cat would ensue. He intended the paradox to highlight the tension between quantum mechanics and common sense reality. Let's walk through the scenario. You place a cat, a Geiger counter, a vial of poison, and a radioactive atom inside the box. The atom's decay is a random quantum event. After exactly 1 hour, the atom has both decayed and not decayed in equal measure. Quantum theory says this dual state is called a superposition. Because the mechanism linking decay to poison is also unobserved, the cat's fate remains unresolved. The cat is simultaneously alive and dead. Only upon opening the box and observing does the wave function collapse into one definite state. Physicists debate what observation truly means. Does the wave function collapse when a Geiger counter registers decay, or only when a conscious observer views the data? Some interpretations, like the Copenhagen interpretation, assert that measurement by any macroscopic system forces collapse. Others, such as many worlds, deny collapse altogether. When you open the box, the universe splits into 2 branches, one where you see a living cat and one where you see a dead cat. Both outcomes exist eternally, each in its own parallel reality. Niels Bohr, a leading proponent of Copenhagen, argued that quantum mechanics describes phenomena only when observed. He insisted no meaningful statement can be made about the cat before measurement. Schrödinger, however, intended his cat to show how awkward that stance becomes when we apply it beyond electrons and photons. If reality depends on observation, what counts as an observer? A cat cannot observe itself. Must a human intervene to define existence? Beyond physics, Schrödinger's cat sparks philosophical reflection on the nature of reality. It invites us to question whether the world possesses definite properties independent of measurement. Does the moon exist when no one looks? Quantum experiments like delayed choice and quantum erasers challenge traditional notions of causality and time, suggesting reality can be shaped by future measurements. In technology, quantum superposition underpins quantum computing. Qubits exploit superposed states to perform parallel calculations, promising exponential speedups for certain problems. Yet, maintaining superposition requires isolating qubits from environmental observations that cause decoherence, analogous to preventing Schrödinger's cat from collapsing into life or death prematurely. In everyday life, the paradox encourages humility about what we claim to know. We often assume hidden variables exist beneath uncertainty, but quantum mechanics warns that uncertainty is fundamental, not merely a gap in knowledge. Schrödinger's cat reminds us that some things remain indeterminate until we engage with them directly. As you reflect on the sealed carrier and its mysterious occupant, picture the question mark glowing softly against the metal. Feel the tension of possibility, 2 realities coexisting in a single moment. Let this image drift through your thoughts as you settle into rest, alive yet at peace, just like the cat in its silent superposition. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out gently. In the space between inhalation and exhalation, accept the uncertainty of Schrödinger's cat. In that serene pause, may your mind find calm and your sleep be as paradox-free as your dreams. The twin paradox. Imagine two identical twins born on Earth. One twin remains at home, while the other boards a sleek rocket ship bound for the stars. As the rocket accelerates to a significant fraction of the speed of light, time aboard slows relative to Earth. After cruising through the cosmos, the traveling twin turns the ship around and returns home. To their surprise, the astronaut is younger than their sibling who stayed behind. This baffling outcome is the twin paradox. The twin paradox arises from Einstein's theory of special relativity, published in 1905. Special relativity reveals that time and space are intertwined. Moving clocks tick more slowly when observed from a stationary frame. This phenomenon, time dilation, becomes significant at speeds approaching light speed, 186,000 miles per second. While an everyday speed difference between cars has a negligible effect, at relativistic velocities, the effect is dramatic. Consider the scenario step by step. The Earthbound twin watches the departing rocket on radar. On-board clocks tick at a steady pace for the traveler, but ground-based instruments record those ticks stretched out in time. If the rocket travels at 80% of light speed, time aboard slows by a factor of about 0.6. 1 year on the ship equals about 1.25 years on Earth. During the outbound and return journeys, the traveling twin experiences less elapsed time. But why is this a paradox? Aren't both twins justified in saying the other's clock runs slow? From the traveler's perspective, the Earthbound twin speeds away and returns. Shouldn't the astronaut see the sibling age more slowly? The key is acceleration and changing frames of reference. Special relativity applies to observers in uniform motion. Turning the ship around breaks that symmetry. During the turnaround, the traveling twin shifts from one inertial frame to another, while the Earth twin remains in a single frame. In 1918, physicist Hermann Bondi proposed the K-calculus to simplify the analysis, showing that the traveling twin's change of velocity creates a discontinuity in simultaneity. In essence, when the ship reverses course, distant clocks on Earth leap forward from the traveler's point of view. This jump accounts for the age difference upon reunion, resolving the apparent paradox without violating relativity. General relativity, Einstein's later theory of gravity, also handles acceleration. By treating acceleration as equivalent to a gravitational field, one sees that the traveling twin experiences a brief gravitational force during turnaround, affecting the flow of time. Both special and general relativity thus agree. The twin who accelerates and decelerates will age less than the twin who remains inertial. Beyond thought experiments, time dilation has real-world confirmation. Atomic clocks flown on high-speed jets or satellites tick slower than identical ground-based clocks, matching predictions to billionths of a second. GPS satellites orbiting Earth at thousands of miles per hour and in weaker gravity must correct for both special and general relativistic effects to provide accurate positioning. The twin paradox also inspires philosophical reflection on the nature of time. We tend to think of time as a universal, ticking clock that governs all. Relativity teaches that time is personal. Each observer carries a unique temporal path, shaped by motion and gravity. 1 hour for one person need not equal 1 hour for another. In literature and cinema, the paradox appears in stories of astronauts returning home to find loved ones aged or lost to time. These narratives capture our fascination and anxiety with the relativity of experience. They remind us that journeys change us not only through our actions, but through the very fabric of time. Consider your own life as a journey through space-time. Every change in pace, new jobs, moves, relationships, reshapes your personal clock. The twin paradox invites us to appreciate that our experience of time depends on our path through life's adventures and challenges. As you reflect on these ideas, picture the two twins, one standing on a clock face, the other aboard a sleek rocket, both linked by fate but separated by motion. Let this image drift through your thoughts. Breathe in deeply and breathe out slowly. In the quiet between each breath, may you find a personal rhythm of time, steady, calm, and uniquely your own, guiding you gently into sleep. The paradox of choice. Imagine standing at a crossroads, dozens of identical signposts radiating outward in every direction, each pointing to a different path. You hesitate, overwhelmed by options. Which way leads to success, happiness, peace of mind? This scenario captures the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the harder it becomes to pick one, and the less satisfied we feel with our decision. Psychologist Barry Schwartz popularized this paradox in his 2004 book, The Paradox of Choice. Drawing on decades of research, he argued that while a certain number of choices enhances freedom and autonomy, excessive options lead to anxiety, regret, and paralysis. Schwartz's work built on earlier findings in decision theory and behavioral economics, which showed that humans are not the perfectly rational actors classical economics assumed. Instead, our minds struggle when faced with too many alternatives. Consider a simple experiment. Two groups of shoppers at a gourmet food market. One group encounters 6 varieties of jam. The other faces 24. More shoppers stop at the lavish display, yet far fewer make a purchase compared to the smaller selection. The abundance entices initial interest, but ultimately overwhelms. This jam study illustrates how more choice can undermine satisfaction and stall action. Why does choice become burdensome? First, decision fatigue wears us down. Each choice requires mental effort, comparing features, weighing pros and cons, imagining outcomes. As options multiply, cognitive load increases, diminishing our ability to make sound judgments. Second, the fear of regretting the wrong choice looms large. With few options, we accept our pick. With many, we constantly wonder if a better alternative awaited. Third, high expectations accompany vast selections. We assume that among hundreds of possibilities, perfection must lie somewhere, so anything less feels disappointing. In modern life, the paradox of choice manifests everywhere. Online streaming platforms offering thousands of movies, restaurants with endless menu items, dating apps presenting countless profiles. Each swipe or click represents a potential choice and a potential source of regret. We chase novelty and variety, yet often end up unsatisfied, wishing we had fewer but better options. Behavioral economists study strategies to cope with choice overload. Satisficers settle for good enough, setting minimal criteria and choosing the first satisfactory option. Maximizers strive to find the best possible outcome, exhaustively comparing alternatives. Maximizers tend to experience more regret and lower life satisfaction. Learning to satisfice, accepting adequacy over perfection, can reduce anxiety and improve well-being. Digital interfaces can also ease decision-making by grouping options into categories, suggesting top picks, or highlighting editors' choices. Designers guide users through complexity. Recommendation algorithms tailor selections based on past preferences, narrowing the field. Yet these solutions carry trade-offs. We surrender some autonomy for convenience, trusting unseen systems to decide on our behalf. Philosophers and ethicists weigh in on the moral dimension of choice. In a world of abundance, is it ethical to limit options for individuals, such as streaming services curating content or governments regulating choice architecture? Some argue that libertarian paternalism, as described by Thaler and Sunstein, nudges people toward healthier or more responsible behaviors without sacrificing freedom. Critics worry that even gentle nudges can undermine autonomy and erode critical thinking. Yet choice remains central to autonomy and self-expression. The key lies in striking balance, enough variation to explore and personalize, yet not so much that options multiply anxiety. Parents guiding children, educators structuring curricula, and policymakers designing social programs all face the challenge of offering meaningful choice without overwhelming beneficiaries. Reflect on that crossroad of signposts. Notice how each arrow, though identical in design, represents a different future: career paths, relationships, hobbies, beliefs. Each demands consideration and commitment. Yet committing to one path need not close off all others. Choices can coexist in our lives, sequenced over time. By focusing on what matters most in this moment, we free ourselves from the tyranny of limitless possibility. As you settle into rest, let go of the need for endless options. Embrace simplicity and focus. Picture the crossroad fading into gentle darkness, signposts dissolving into a single path, illuminated by a soft light. Breathe in clarity, breathe out doubt. In the space between each breath, find contentment. Let the paradox of choice recede and allow peaceful sleep to guide you onward. The unexpected hanging paradox. Imagine a condemned prisoner in a dark cell, informed by the judge that he will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week, and it will be a surprise. The prisoner will not know the day of execution until the executioner arrives at his cell at noon. The prisoner thinks through the possibilities. He reasons that the hanging cannot occur on Friday. If he reaches Friday morning alive, he will know it must happen that day, violating the surprise. Therefore, Thursday becomes impossible as well. If he survives until Thursday morning, knowing Friday is ruled out, then Thursday would no longer be a surprise. By backward induction, he eliminates all days. Convinced, he relaxes, only to be awakened at noon on Wednesday, shocked by his execution. This is the unexpected hanging paradox. The paradox hinges on a clash between logical deduction and epistemic surprise. The prisoner's reasoning appears airtight. By eliminating each possible day through backward logic, no surprise execution can occur. Yet when the executioner arrives on an earlier day, the lesson is delivered. The logical chain does not prevent a genuine surprise. The crux lies in the moment the prisoner recognizes a day as impossible. That recognition itself changes the conditions of surprise. This puzzle first circulated in the 1940s. Attributed to philosophers like Martin Gardner and later popularized by luminaries such as Raymond Smullyan, it closely relates to the surprise quiz or surprise test variants used in schools. A teacher announces a pop quiz next week, and students try to deduce which day it will fall, only to be caught off guard. These thought experiments underscore black and white logic's limitations when applied to knowledge about one's own future awareness. To see why the prisoner's elimination fails, consider the definition of surprise. It requires that on the morning of execution, the prisoner cannot be certain it will occur that day. Backward reasoning assumes that if only one day remains, certainty follows. But the paradox shows that eliminating options dynamically changes the prisoner's state of knowledge. On Wednesday morning, Friday and Thursday seem ruled out, but until the noon knock, Wednesday remains a plausible but uncertain outcome. The surprise persists despite prior deductions. Philosophers have proposed various resolutions. Some argue that the prisoner's backward induction is invalid because it wrongly treats will know as equivalent to could deduce. Others invoke epistemic logic, which distinguishes between what is true, believed, and knowable. In these systems, eliminating a day through self-referential reasoning alters the future's epistemic structure, preventing certainty until the moment of realization. Game theorists model the paradox as a dynamic knowledge game. The prisoner's beliefs and the judge's promise interact over time. Each day survived updates the prisoner's belief state. On Thursday morning, the prisoner believes Friday is impossible, but he does not know for certain that the execution won't happen Thursday. Preserving surprise. This dynamic view shows that the prisoner's reasoning unwittingly destroys the very surprise he aims to avoid. Beyond philosophical puzzles, the unexpected hanging paradox has real-world echoes. Security planners must consider adversaries' ability to anticipate events. In cybersecurity, deploying a patch at an unpredictable time reduces the chance that attackers will prepare exploits in advance. Military strategists use surprise maneuvers precisely because opponents cannot logically eliminate all possible attack dates. In legal settings, courts issue rulings with specified future dates. Litigants attempt to predict outcomes. The paradox warns that foreknowledge can be self-defeating. Once a party deduces a date, the element of strategic advantage may vanish, altering opponents' behavior. In everyday life, we encounter versions of this paradox when managing deadlines and surprises, from planning surprise parties to scheduling performance reviews. Announcing an event window but not specifying the exact timing preserves genuine surprise and strategic advantage. Reflect on the prisoner's cell as you consider this paradox. Envision the calendar on the wall, days crossed out one by one until none remain. Yet the knock still comes. Feel the tension of surprise nestled within logical certainty. Let the rhythm of crossed-out squares and the sudden realization of noon carry you into mindful stillness. As you settle into rest, imagine each crossed-out day fading into darkness until only the present moment remains. Breathe in uncertainty, breathe out expectation. In the silent pause before the knock, find tranquility. Allow the unexpected hanging paradox to remind you that some outcomes elude logic, and in that mystery, your mind can rest. The paradox of tolerance. Imagine a society proudly proclaiming, all views are welcome. Citizens gather in plazas to share ideas freely. Peace, prosperity, enlightenment. Yet what happens when intolerant voices arrive? Those who demand the exclusion of others, who preach hatred and seek to silence dissent. If the society tolerates these intolerant views in the name of free expression, those very voices can seize power and dismantle the freedoms that allowed them to speak. This dilemma, whether unlimited tolerance leads to the destruction of tolerance itself, is the paradox of tolerance. The paradox of tolerance was articulated by philosopher Karl Popper in his 1945 work, The Open Society and Its Enemies. Popper argued that if a society extends unconditional tolerance even to the intolerant will eventually exploit this generosity and eradicate the tolerant. He insisted that to maintain a free and open society, we must be intolerant of intolerance, refusing to grant a platform to those who would deny others their basic rights. Consider the logic step by step. A tolerant community allows all peaceful opinions, trusting in rational debate to expose flawed arguments. Along comes a radical group, preaching violence, discrimination, and the suspension of civil liberties. The tolerant majority, committed to free speech, welcomes them into public forums. Their fiery rhetoric attracts followers. With each new recruit, they gain influence, eventually swaying public opinion and winning elections. Once in power, they repeal protections for free expression, except for their own, silencing dissent and persecuting minorities. The tolerant society, in its refusal to reject hate, falls prey to its own virtue. Throughout history, we find echoes of this paradox. In Weimar Germany of the 1920s and 30s, democratic systems allowed extremist parties to participate in elections. The Nazi Party, exploiting free speech and assembly, rose to power and dismantled the very democracy that tolerated it. Popper's insight, written in the wake of such events, warns that liberal societies must defend the principles of openness by excluding those who would destroy it. Modern democracies face similar challenges. Hate speech laws, anti-discrimination statutes, and platform moderation policies grapple with where to draw the line. Some argue for absolute free speech, trusting that reason and civility will triumph. Others point to online arenas where extremist ideologies spread unchecked, recruiting new adherents and coordinating violence. Social media platforms wrestle with whether to ban hateful content or risk aiding the rise of intolerance. Philosophers propose frameworks to navigate this paradox. Defenders of free speech, like John Stuart Mill, emphasize the marketplace of ideas, suggesting that bad ideas are defeated by good ones through open debate. Yet Mill also acknowledged limits. He supported restricting speech that directly harms others. Popper's solution is more stringent. A tolerant society must reserve the right to defend itself against those who would abolish tolerance, even if that means limiting the rights of the intolerant. In practice, this means enacting laws and policies that prohibit incitement to violence, hate crimes, and the suppression of fundamental rights. It means that a democracy can and must bar political parties that reject democratic norms. The paradox teaches that tolerance is not a boundless virtue. It requires vigilance, boundaries, and the willingness to defend open principles. The paradox of tolerance also arises in personal relationships and organizational cultures. A team that claims to value every opinion may find itself derailed by a single disruptive voice that refuses to compromise or respect norms. In workplaces, unchecked negativity or harassment can poison morale, forcing leaders to set clear behavioral standards. In families, endless accommodation of harmful behaviors can erode trust and safety for all members. Importantly, defending tolerance does not mean embracing authoritarianism. The goal is not to suppress dissenting views wholesale, but to ensure that debate remains grounded in mutual respect and shared commitment to fundamental rights. Excluding only those who actively seek to remove others' freedoms preserves the open society while guarding against self-destruction. Reflect on our two profiles facing each other, one welcoming all views, the other crossed out in intolerance. The image captures the tension between openness and self-protection. Without boundaries, openness can be exploited. With rigid exclusion, society risks becoming closed and oppressive. As you reflect on this paradox, consider the delicate balance in your own life, how you engage with opposing opinions, when you speak up, and when you draw the line. Tolerance requires strength, to listen, to debate, and sometimes to refuse. Let this insight settle in your mind as you breathe slowly. Inhale, respect. Exhale, resolve, and carry this balanced vigilance into both your waking gaze and restful nights. The Preface Paradox. Imagine an author who has just completed a meticulously researched book. Every chapter brims with carefully verified facts, dates cross-checked, sources cited, arguments tested. The author believes each individual claim is true, yet in the preface they write, "Despite my best efforts, some errors no doubt remain." How can the author rationally trust every statement and still expect at least one mistake? This tension is the Preface Paradox. The Preface Paradox was named by philosopher David Makinson in 1965. It highlights a clash between two reasonable attitudes: local certainty, confidence in each specific belief based on thorough research; global fallibility, acknowledgement that humans are prone to error, especially across many details. An author can justifiably believe Claim 1, Claim 2, Claim N, while also believing that at least one of those N claims is false. Both attitudes are rational, but logically inconsistent when held together. Picture a historian writing 100 chapters on ancient civilizations. For Chapter 1, they verify every artifact. For Chapter 2, every inscription, and so on. After exhausting primary sources and peer reviews, they feel certain about each chapter. Still, in their preface, they confess that errors probably slipped through: typos, mistaken dates, misinterpretations. Their confidence in each chapter coexists with skepticism about the book as a whole. Makinson introduced this paradox during discussions of formal belief systems. He showed that even a perfectly logical agent, operating with sound evidence, could end up holding a set of individually justified beliefs that conflict with a reasonable doubt about the set as a whole. Subsequent work by Isaac Levi and others deepened the analysis, exploring how rational agents should manage large bundles of beliefs under uncertainty. Probabilistic reasoning resolves the paradox neatly. If the author assigns a high probability, say 99%, to each of 100 claims, the probability that all are correct is 0.99 to the power of 100, approximately 37%. It is therefore rational to believe each claim individually. Each has a 99% chance, and also rational to believe that at least one is wrong, a 63% chance. Our intuitive discomfort gives way to mathematical clarity. High confidence in parts can coexist with low confidence in the whole. Belief revision theories further address how agents update their convictions when they discover a mistake. A single erratum retracts one false claim, yet the author's overall approach, verifying each part while acknowledging fallibility, remains sound. Rationality, in this view, tolerates a limited global inconsistency in exchange for practical reasoning. The Preface Paradox appears outside academic books. Consider planning a major event. You trust each vendor, caterer, florist, venue, but still pack extra supplies just in case. You believe every arrangement will succeed, yet you prepare for at least one glitch. In software development, engineers write unit tests for every function while keeping a bug tracker for unforeseen errors. In journalism, editors fact-check articles line by line, yet publish with an errata page for later corrections. In decision-making, we often hold precise expectations about individual outcomes, project timelines, financial forecasts, health diagnoses, while also acknowledging the real chance of mistakes. The Preface Paradox reminds us that intellectual humility and meticulous analysis are complementary virtues. We need confidence to act on details, and humility to accept that perfection is unattainable. Picture that open book on a black background, one page dense with text, the facing page simply labeled errata. Let this image settle your mind. Each fact you trust in your life, your skills, relationships, experiences, can be upheld with care. Yet you need not fear small imperfections. Breathe in certainty. Breathe out humility. Embrace the gentle balance between knowing and not knowing. In the quiet space between each breath, allow the Preface Paradox to ease your mind into peaceful slumber. The Surprise Exam Paradox. Imagine a high school classroom buzzing with anticipation. At the end of the week, a teacher announces, "There will be a surprise exam next week. You won't know which day until it happens." The students cheer. No cramming required on a specific date. Yet one clever pupil begins logical reasoning, attempting to predict the exam. If the exam hasn't occurred by Thursday evening, it must take place on Friday, and thus would no longer be a surprise. Therefore, Friday is impossible. With Friday ruled out, if the exam hasn't occurred by Wednesday evening, it must be on Thursday, again negating surprise. Thus, Thursday is impossible too. By similar reasoning, the student rules out Wednesday, then Tuesday, and finally Monday. No weekday remains possible without spoiling the surprise. Convinced, the class relaxes. Monday passes with no exam, neither does Tuesday or Wednesday. On Thursday, the teacher walks in and announces, "Today is your surprise exam." The students are astonished. They never saw it coming. This contradiction between logical deduction and genuine surprise highlights how backward reasoning can fail when applied to knowledge about one's own future awareness. This puzzle first circulated in the 1940s, attributed to philosophers like Martin Gardner, and later popularized by luminaries such as Raymond Smullyan. It closely relates to the surprise quiz or surprise test variants used in schools. A teacher announces a pop quiz next week, and students try to deduce which day it will fall, only to be caught off guard. These thought experiments underscore black and white logic's limitations when applied to dynamic knowledge states. To see why the prisoner's elimination fails, consider the definition of surprise. It requires that on the morning of the exam, students cannot be certain it will occur that day. Backward reasoning assumes that if only one day remains, prediction is certain. Yet the paradox shows that eliminating options can alter the student's knowledge state, preventing certainty until the exam actually appears. Each day survived updates beliefs, and the final remaining day is still unpredictable because the chain of eliminations itself creates uncertainty about what constitutes surprise. Game theorists model the paradox as a dynamic knowledge game. Each day the board is wiped clean. The student's confidence resets. When Thursday morning arrives, the class has eliminated all other options, but they do not truly know the exam cannot happen that day until the knock on the door occurs. This dynamic view demonstrates that self-referential reasoning about future knowledge can never fully eliminate genuine surprise. Beyond philosophical puzzles, the surprise exam paradox has real-world echoes. Security planners use unpredictable inspections to deter malfeasance. Auditors announce random audits to keep companies honest. Intelligence agencies conduct unannounced drills or checks. The uncertainty prevents complacency. Financial markets face black swan events, rare, unpredictable shocks that defy forecasts. In each case, logical planning and real-world unpredictability intertwine in ways that mirror the classroom scenario. In everyday life, we encounter versions of this paradox when managing deadlines and surprises, from scheduling performance reviews to planning surprise parties. Announcing an event window without specifying the exact timing preserves genuine surprise and strategic advantage. The tension between backward reasoning and lived experience reminds us that some outcomes elude logic. Modern epistemologists propose ways to resolve the paradox. Temporal epistemic logic distinguishes between deductive elimination and actual knowledge, recognizing that ruling out dates on paper doesn't grant true certainty in practice. Dynamic logic accounts for how each passing moment updates what can be known, ensuring that final day uncertainty remains intact until the event occurs. Paraconsistent logic even permits holding the contradictory beliefs, "the exam cannot happen today," and "I will be surprised today," without collapsing into incoherence, reflecting human reasoning under uncertainty. As you settle into rest, imagine that classroom chalkboard with "surprise exam tomorrow" scrawled in chalk and a question mark hovering above. Recall the student's confident deductions dissolving into genuine astonishment. Let this image settle your mind. Each crossed-out date represents a breath. Inhale anticipation, exhale relief. In the silent pause before the knock, find tranquility. Allow the surprise exam paradox to remind you that some outcomes cannot be anticipated by logic alone, and in that mystery, your mind can rest. The Hempel's Raven Paradox. Imagine a single black raven perched on a bare twig, the only bright shape against a solid black backdrop. A white magnifying glass hovers beside it, as if ready to inspect every feather. The simple scientific rule at stake is, all ravens are black. Every time we observe a black raven, we feel our confidence in this rule grow. Yet philosopher Carl Hempel pointed out that an equivalent statement, everything that is not black is not a raven, leads us to test seemingly irrelevant observations. A green apple, a white cloud, or a red fire truck all count as confirmations of all ravens are black. How can seeing a green apple really tell us something about ravens? This puzzling tension is Hempel's Raven Paradox. In the 1940s, Hempel formalized this challenge within the logic of scientific confirmation. He noted that the two statements, all ravens are black, and all non-black things are non-ravens, are logically equivalent. Any observation that supports one must support the other. Thus, examining non-black, non-raven items should increase our belief in the color of ravens just as much as observing black ravens does. Your inspection of a single green apple, by this logic, confirms the universal rule as effectively as spotting a crow in flight. To see why this feels counterintuitive, picture yourself in a forest. You scan the trees for ravens, delighted each time you spot one with glossy black wings. You hardly notice the rocks, leaves, or squirrels. Yet under Hempel's reasoning, every non-black leaf you pass without a raven hidden beneath silently bolsters the hypothesis. Intuition rebels. Confirmation seems direct when you observe ravens, but indirect and oddly trivial when you inspect unrelated objects. Hempel's paradox spotlights deeper questions about how evidence supports general laws. Philosophers term the problem of distinguishing relevant from irrelevant evidence the core of confirmation theory. Not all logically equivalent statements feel equally supported by the same data. We want a theory of confirmation that matches scientific practice, where researchers focus on direct tests, examining many ravens, rather than cataloging every non-black object in their environment. Several responses attempt to resolve the paradox. Bayesian confirmation theory assigns probabilities to hypotheses and updates them via observed data. Although seeing a non-black, non-raven does raise the probability of all ravens are black, its effect is negligible if there are vastly more non-black non-ravens than ravens. A single green leaf hardly moves the needle compared to a confirmed raven sighting. Bayesianism thus restores our intuition. Direct observations weigh far more heavily than indirect ones. Another approach introduces the notion of projectability. Philosopher Nelson Goodman argued that only certain predicates, properties like black, when applied to ravens, are projectable in inductive inference. Black, in the context of birds, is a legitimate predicate for forming generalizations, whereas non-black is not a natural basis for projecting about ravens. By restricting which predicates count for induction, we avoid bizarre confirmations like green apples. In cognitive psychology, studies show that humans naturally engage in selective sampling. We look for disconfirming evidence, white ravens, to test color hypotheses rather than accumulating confirmatory examples. Focusing on potential counterexamples aligns with Karl Popper's idea of falsification. Scientific theories advance by surviving attempts to refute them, not by tallying supportive instances. Beyond philosophy, the Raven Paradox has practical echoes in data science and machine learning. When training a model to recognize ravens, we supply thousands of labeled images of black birds. Adding countless images of non-black objects adds little value and wastes resources. Good dataset design emphasizes relevant samples, diverse examples of ravens under different lighting and backgrounds, over sheer volume of irrelevant data. Reflect on the lone raven icon and the magnifying glass beside it. Let this image remind you that not all confirmation is created equal. Some evidence shines brightly, like a raven's glossy feathers, while other evidence blurs into the background. As you consider this paradox, think of your own learning. Focus on the most informative examples, question surprising patterns, and resist the lure of trivial confirmations. Breathe in curiosity, breathe out clarity. In the space between each breath, allow the raven paradox to settle gently in your mind. May your thoughts find focus in the essential, and may that focus guide you into a restful sleep. The Simpson Paradox imagined two university departments reviewing applications from men and women. In Department A, 60 out of 100 men are admitted, 60%, and 30 out of 50 women are admitted, 60%. In Department B, 20 out of 100 men are admitted, 20%, and 10 out of 50 women are admitted, 20%. At first glance, both departments treat men and women equally. Now, suppose most women apply to the more competitive Department B and most men to the less competitive A. If 90 men apply to A and 10 to B, then 54 men are admitted in A and 2 in B, a total of 56 out of 100 men, 56%. If 10 women apply to A and 90 to B, then 6 women are admitted in A and 18 in B, a total of 24 out of 100 women, 24%. Suddenly, the overall admission rate favors men, despite equal acceptance rates within each department. This reversal when data are combined versus separated is Simpson's paradox. At its heart, this paradox shows how aggregating data can mask or reverse trends seen in smaller groups. The key factor is the unequal distribution of applicants across departments. Department A has a high acceptance rate but few women, while Department B has a low rate but many women. When you pool the results, the group with more applicants to the tougher department appears disadvantaged overall, even though each department treats both genders the same. This phenomenon was first noted by statistician Edward H. Simpson in 1951. He examined similar puzzles in medical studies, where treatments seemed beneficial within individual hospitals, but harmful when data were combined across hospitals. The paradox highlights the danger of drawing conclusions from aggregated averages without considering underlying group differences. Consider a simpler example. Two treatments, X and Y, tested in two separate clinics. In Clinic 1, 80% of patients improve on X and 90% on Y. In Clinic 2, 70% improve on X and 85% on Y. Within each clinic, Y outperforms X. Yet if many more severe patients choose Y in Clinic 1 and many mild cases choose X in Clinic 2, the overall success rates might show X as superior when the data are merged. The shift occurs because patient severity, an unaccounted, confounding variable, skews the combined results. In everyday life, Simpson's paradox can appear in sports statistics. A baseball player might have a higher batting average at both home and away games individually, yet a lower overall average if he faces tougher pitchers more often at home. Stock market returns can be higher in two separate years for a fund compared to a benchmark, yet lower overall if the fund's worst performing periods coincide with heavier investment. To avoid the trap, analysts use strategies like stratification and multivariate analysis. By breaking data into meaningful subgroups, such as departments, clinics, or game locations, we preserve the true relationships. Regression techniques adjust for confounding variables, estimating the effect of one factor while holding others constant. Simpson's paradox also offers a lesson in critical thinking. It reminds us that numbers can be misleading when taken out of context. Averages and percentages, must be examined alongside underlying distributions. We must ask, who are the subjects, and how are they allocated? Without this scrutiny, well-intentioned policies based on aggregated data can have unintended consequences. In policymaking, Simpson's paradox warns against one-size-fits-all solutions. If a job training program shows high success in both urban and rural areas separately, policymakers might assume it works equally well everywhere. But if urban applicants tend to have higher skill levels, combining the data could obscure lower success in rural settings, leading to misdirected resources. As you reflect on this paradox, picture the three bar charts side by side, two small charts showing equal treatment, and the larger chart revealing reversal. Let this image linger as you consider how hidden patterns can overturn apparent fairness. Breathe in awareness, breathe out assumptions. In the quiet moments before sleep, embrace the complexity of data and the care needed to understand it fully. Let the paradox guide you toward thoughtful rest. The Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox. Imagine a pair of particles created together and sent far apart, one to a lab on Earth, the other aboard a spacecraft orbiting Mars. These particles share a special connection called quantum entanglement. Measure the spin of the Earth-bound particle, and you instantly know the spin of its partner, even though no signal travels between them. If you find the first particle spinning up, its twin must be spinning down. Albert Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, because it seems to defy the rule that nothing can travel faster than light. In 1935, Einstein, Boris Podolsky, and Nathan Rosen published a thought experiment to challenge the completeness of quantum mechanics. They argued that if quantum theory were complete, it would allow instantaneous influence across space, violating relativity. To avoid this, they suggested that entangled particles carry hidden information, hidden variables, determining their spins before measurement. According to this view, measuring one particle merely reveals pre-existing properties, not causes a distant change. To see why this matters, imagine hiding cards in two boxes labeled A and D. You shuffle them, so one box holds the red card and the other the black. Send box B to a friend on another continent. When you open box A and find the red card, you instantly know box B contains the black. No magic involved. You simply learned what was already set. Einstein and his colleagues hoped quantum particles behaved similarly, with hidden variables assigning definite values before you look. Yet subsequent experiments proved otherwise. In the 1960s, physicist John Bell derived mathematical inequalities showing that no hidden variable theory confined to locality, that is, no theory that prohibits faster-than-light influence, can reproduce all quantum predictions. Experiments by Elaine Aspect in the 1980s and many others since have tested Bell's inequalities, measuring entangled photons separated by kilometers. The results consistently violate Bell's bounds, confirming that quantum particles do not carry predetermined spins. Instead, the act of measurement itself seems to bring about a definite outcome, instantaneously correlating both particles in a way that cannot be explained by local hidden variables. This outcome forces us to rethink notions of separation and causation. If no signal passes between entangled particles, how does the second know the first's result? Some interpretations accept non-locality, acknowledging quantum connections that transcend space, while others embrace complementary views, like the many worlds interpretation. According to many worlds, every measurement spawns parallel branches. In one universe, particle A is up and B is down. In another, A is down and B is up. No spooky influence is needed because each outcome happens in its own branch. Beyond physics, entanglement finds applications in emerging technologies. Quantum cryptography uses entangled photons to create unbreakable encryption. Any eavesdropping attempt disturbs the entanglement, alerting communicators. Quantum teleportation transfers the state of one particle to another across distance, not by moving matter, but by exploiting entanglement and classical communication, an advance that may power future quantum networks. Entanglement also shapes philosophical debates about reality. It challenges the idea that objects possess independent properties when unobserved. In everyday life, we assume things have definite states, whether we look or not. A light is on or off, even if you're not in the room. Quantum mechanics forces us to accept that at a fundamental level, some properties do not crystallize until observed, and interconnected systems can exhibit non-local ties. Reflect on those two entangled dots, one here, one there, linked by a zigzag line of invisible influence. Picture the measurement devices beside them, poised to reveal spin in an instant. Let this image drift through your thoughts as you settle into rest. Breathe in the mystery of quantum connection. Breathe out the comfort of gentle intrigue. In the space between each breath, allow the wonder of entanglement to lull you into peaceful sleep. The Buridan's ass paradox. Imagine a donkey standing exactly midway between two identical, equally enticing stacks of hay. The hay to the left smells fresh and sweet, and the hay to the right looks just as fresh and sweet. The donkey finds itself utterly unable to choose one over the other, because both options are perfectly equal. Paralyzed by indecision, it remains stranded, starving despite abundant food on both sides. This seemingly absurd scenario is known as Buridan's ass paradox, illustrating how perfect symmetry in choices can lead to total inaction. The story of Buridan's ass traces back to medieval philosophy. It is often, but perhaps incorrectly, attributed to the 14th century French logician Jean Buridan, who used it to explore questions of free will and determinism. Although Buridan himself may not have framed the tale in exactly this way, the paradox bears his name because it highlights a crucial problem. If an agent has two equally preferable options, purely rational deliberation provides no basis for choosing one. Without any distinguishing factor, choice becomes impossible. Think through the donkey's dilemma. Left hay, fresh, green, fragrant. Right hay, identical in every respect. The donkey's decision procedure might be: compare value of left versus right. If left is better, go left. If right is better, go right. But if both are exactly equal, neither comparison yields a difference. The decision rule offers no guidance. With nothing to break the tie, the donkey cannot move toward either stack, and it starves. Philosophers use Buridan's ass to question what drives decision-making. Do we choose based solely on rational evaluation of options? Or do factors like random whims, external cues, or free will play a role? In everyday life, perfect symmetry is rare. Differences in taste, context, or timing usually break ties. Yet the paradox forces us to ask, if options truly offered equal utility, how would we decide? Must we appeal to non-rational elements, such as a simple nudge or even randomness, to resolve perfect indifference? Modern decision theory addresses such situations by introducing tie-breaking procedures. For instance, algorithms might include a random number generator to choose between equally valued options. In behavioral economics, researchers observe that people rarely face perfect ties. They rely on subconscious preferences, habits, or slight contextual cues. Even trivial factors, sound in the environment, slight temperature differences, or the order in which options are presented, can tip the scales in real-world choices. Beyond donkeys and hay, Buridan's paradox appears in technology. Computer programs that rank search results or recommend products sometimes encounter ties in relevance scores. To prevent indecision, engineers implement secondary criteria, alphabetical order, timestamps, or random shuffling to break ties. These practical solutions restore decisive action even when primary metrics are equal. In artificial intelligence, tie-breaking can influence fairness. Suppose an AI system must assign two equally qualified job candidates to the same role. Without a clear secondary rule, a deterministic tiebreaker, such as comparing last names, might inadvertently introduce bias. Designers must carefully choose tie-breaking mechanisms that uphold ethical standards, sometimes involving random choice or rotation to ensure equity. Buridan's ass also serves as a metaphor for human indecision. Faced with two equally appealing career paths, we may drift without progress. Confronted with two delicious desserts, we might flip a coin rather than agonize. Recognizing the paradox encourages us to set our own tiebreakers, personal values, long-term goals, or simple deadlines to guide decisions when rational analysis reaches its limit. In philosophy, the paradox fuels debates about free will and determinism. If all our choices result from calculating the greatest utility, then perfect symmetry would leave us paralyzed, suggesting that pure reason cannot fully account for human agency. Free will, in this view, introduces a non-rational spark, an intrinsic ability to choose without deterministic justification. Critics argue that undetermined randomness is not genuine freedom, while others maintain that some element outside strict calculation must drive choice. Imagine the donkey again on that black background, the two haystacks glowing white in stark contrast. Both seem beckoning, yet neither yields. Let this image linger as you reflect on your own choices. When you face two paths that appear equal, what guides you forward? Is it reason alone, or do you draw on intuition, impulse, or principle? As you settle into rest, consider small ways to break your own ties. Flip a coin, set a timer, or choose the leftmost option by habit. Breathe in calm resolve, breathe out lingering doubt. In the quiet between each breath, allow the donkey's dilemma to transform into gentle acceptance. Sometimes perfect equality demands a simple nudge. Let that nudge be your guide into peaceful sleep. Moral luck paradox. Imagine a driver late for an appointment, gripping the wheel under streetlights as rain slicks the pavement. Approaching a fork in the road, a pedestrian suddenly steps into view. The driver jerks the wheel to the left, narrowly avoiding the person but crashing into a fence. No one is hurt, and the driver walks away, shaken but safe. Now, imagine the same driver, the same rain, the same sudden pedestrian, but this time, the pedestrian stumbles forward just as the car swerves. The vehicle strikes the person, who is seriously injured. In both cases, the driver's actions and intentions were identical, only the outcome differed by chance. Yet our moral reactions diverge sharply. In the first scenario, we praise quick reflexes. In the second, we condemn negligence. This unsettling gap between intention and outcome is moral luck. Moral luck shows that factors beyond our control, luck, shape how we judge actions. We expect moral appraisal to depend on intentions and choices under our control. But when chance alters outcomes, called resultant luck, we often adjust praise or blame accordingly. Two supermarket shoppers push identical trolleys through crowded aisles. One accidentally knocks over a vase that shatters. The other passes by without incident. Though their conduct is the same, we view the unlucky shopper as clumsy or rude. and the lucky one as careful, even if both exercised equal care. Our life circumstances also involve circumstantial luck, the situations we face. A young activist in a peaceful country never faces police brutality. Another activist in a repressive regime risks arrest daily for the same protests. When the latter demonstrates courage under threat, we laud bravery that the former never had to display. Yet both individuals share motives and convictions, only their contexts differ. Then there's constitutive luck, the traits we inherit. One person naturally responds to stress with calm deliberation, another reacts with panic. Both arrive at a dangerous crosswalk where a cyclist swerves unexpectedly. The calm driver executes a perfect evasive maneuver. The panicked driver freezes. We praise the former, criticize the latter, yet neither chose their innate temperament. Their character, shaped by genes and upbringing, reflects luck, not pure choice. Finally, causal luck highlights how chains of events beyond our awareness set the stage for any action. A chance conversation at breakfast leads the driver to take a different route that afternoon, placing them at the fork when the pedestrian appears. Without that random decision, the entire encounter would never occur. Philosophers like Thomas Nagel and Bernard Williams argue that moral responsibility can't neatly separate intentions from outcomes. They suggest that we must acknowledge luck's sway and temper our judgments. If two drivers act with equal care, but only one faces tragic consequences, does it make sense to hold one morally superior or more blameworthy? Moral luck forces us to reconsider the fairness of praise and blame. Legal systems grapple with this tension. Manslaughter and attempted manslaughter hinge on actual harm. Two identical reckless acts, one fatal, one not, result in vastly different charges. Some argue that fault should rest solely on the reckless behavior, not on the mutable result of chance. Others maintain that outcomes matter for societal protection and justice. A tragic death demands accountability. In business and sports, moral luck shapes reputations. A talented entrepreneur launches a startup, but market downturns sink it. A rival's timing aligns with economic booms, leading to success. We call one visionary and the other a failure, even though both made similar decisions. In athletics, a basketball player's buzzer-beating shot either swishes home or rims out by millimeters. We hail or critique their skill, oblivious to the random bounce. Understanding moral luck encourages humility. We recognize the role of chance in our own lives, times when fortune spared us and when it betrayed us. We can strive for fairer judgment by focusing on controlled factors, intentions, reasoning, and effort, rather than on outcomes alone. When assessing others, asking, did they act responsibly given what they knew, feels more just than, was the result good or bad? As you reflect on the driver's dilemma under streetlights, consider your own judgments. Inhale empathy for those caught by bad luck. Exhale restraint from hasty blame. Recognize that life's randomness shapes many outcomes, even when choices and intentions remain constant. Let this understanding wash over you as you settle into rest, a gentle reminder that moral evaluation can embrace both responsibility and compassion. The lottery paradox. Imagine you buy a ticket in a fair lottery with 1 million numbered balls. You know there's only one winning number, and the chance any given ticket wins is 1 in a million, virtually zero. For each ball, it's rational to believe it will lose. You think, ball 1 won't win, ball 2 won't win, and so on through ball 1 million won't win. Yet you also believe that one ball must win. How can you simultaneously believe each ticket will lose and also believe that some ticket will win? This tension is the lottery paradox. The paradox arises from two reasonable principles. If the probability of an event is extremely low, it's rational to dismiss it. And if it's certain that one event in a set must occur, it's rational to accept that at least one will. Applied to the lottery, you reject each individual ticket's chance, but accept that some ticket wins. Logic seems to break down. Believing every ticket will lose implies no winner, contradicting the certainty of one winner. Think through the logic. For ball number 1, with odds of 0.00001, you conclude it won't be drawn. Repeat this for every ball. After a million such steps, a rational person would deny any ball could win. Yet, by the rules of the lottery, one and only one ball will be drawn. The paradox forces us to question how we form beliefs based on high or low probabilities, and how we handle collective certainty versus individual improbability. Philosophers and logicians study this paradox in the context of belief and rational acceptance. One approach distinguishes between belief and acceptance. You might accept that each ticket will lose, using accept to mean treat as true for practical reasoning, while believing that some ticket will win. This separation allows you to act on each low probability case as a practical certainty without denying the overarching certainty that there is a winner. Another resolution uses threshold models. You set a probability cutoff, say 0.001, below which you automatically dismiss outcomes. Each ticket's chance is below the threshold, so you dismiss them. But you carve out an exception. Because you know by definition that one ticket must win, you refine your rule to exempt exactly one from dismissal. This pragmatic tweak avoids the outright contradiction, though it feels ad hoc. In probability theory, the paradox highlights the difference between probabilistic reasoning and logical deduction. Logic demands consistency. If you deny each proposition, ticket number n will win, you must deny the disjunction, some ticket will win. But probability allows high confidence in many events and certainty in their union. Bayesian reasoning, which updates beliefs based on evidence, navigates this by assigning near-zero probability to each individual and certainty to the collective, without treating them identically. The lottery paradox also applies in everyday risk assessment. Consider driving home each day, encountering countless hazards on the road. Each individual danger, hitting a pedestrian, engine failure, sudden storm, has a tiny probability. It's rational to treat each risk as negligible. Yet you also recognize that accidents happen and prepare accordingly. Wearing a seatbelt, buying insurance, driving carefully. You dismiss each specific scenario but accept that some accident will likely occur over many trips. In medical screening, doctors face this tension when evaluating test results. A rare disease might affect only 1 in 10,000 people. A patient's positive test has a low probability of indicating the disease, so the doctor dismisses it for each patient. Yet, if you test 100,000 patients, you know about 10 cases will arise, and treating each test as false negative would miss them all. Physicians balance dismissing unlikely diagnoses with vigilance for the few true cases, mirroring the logic of the paradox. Software engineers encounter a similar issue in system monitoring. Error logs generate thousands of rare warnings, each with a minuscule chance of indicating real failure. Engineers often silence these low-priority alerts to avoid alarm fatigue, yet they need to investigate at least one when a genuine problem emerges. Filtering out noise without missing real issues echoes the lottery's conflict between individual improbabilities and guaranteed outcomes. The paradox invites reflection on how we set decision thresholds in life. Should we dismiss every tiny risk? Should we demand absolute certainty before acting on any low-probability event? A balanced approach recognizes when a collection of unlikely events still demands attention. Fire drills, health checkups, and backups anticipate the rare failure, even as we treat each specific failure scenario as unlikely. As you imagine the spinning lottery cage and the single highlighted ball, consider your own judgments. You dismiss minor worries, yet prepare for major ones. Breathe in cautious acceptance of small probabilities. Breathe out stubborn denial of likely occurrences. In the quiet between each breath, let the lottery paradox remind you that accepting near certainty on the many and absolute certainty on the one need not lock you in contradiction if you balance belief and action wisely. The Newcomb's paradox. Imagine you stand before two boxes. Box A is transparent, containing exactly $1,000 in plain view. Box B is opaque, sealed, and bears a question mark. You are told that a highly reliable predictor has already made a prediction about your choice. If the predictor foresaw that you will take only box B, it placed $1 million inside it. If the predictor foresaw that you will take both boxes, it left box B empty. Now the boxes sit in front of you. Will you take only the opaque box, hoping for $1 million, or will you take both and secure the sure $1,000 in box A? This dilemma is Newcomb's paradox. On one hand, taking both boxes seems to guarantee more money. You get the $1,000 regardless of box B's contents. And if the predictor filled box B, you walk away with $1,001,000. On the other hand, if you believe in the predictor's near-perfect accuracy, the act of committing to one box signals confidence in the predictor's forecast, making it more likely box B contains the million. The question becomes, which reasoning leads to the best outcome? Many people split along two lines. Two boxers argue from a straightforward causal perspective. The predictor's decision has already been made. Your current choice cannot change what's inside box B. Therefore, you should take both boxes, because you'll always secure the extra $1,000. One boxer's focus on expected utility. If the predictor is almost always right, refusing box A makes it far more probable that box B is full. By committing to one box, you maximize the expected payoff, approximately 0.99 times $1 million, instead of 0.99 times $1 million plus 0.01 times $1 million. The extra $1,000 is outweighed by the chance of an empty box B if you two-box. The paradox invites us to question how predictions, causation, and decision-making interact. In the classic thought experiment, the predictor's reputation comes from nearly flawless records. It has almost never erred. If you regularly choose both boxes, box B remains empty because the predictor adjusts to your pattern. If you consistently choose only box B reliably contains the million. Your belief about the predictor's reliability directly influences your best strategy. Philosophers debate whether the predictor's foresight is genuinely predictive or whether the scenario implies a form of backward causation, your future decision influencing past events. From a strict causal standpoint, nothing you do now can retroactively place money in box B. The predictor's action is fixed in the past. Yet, in a world of perfect prediction, your present plan is entangled with past placements. One-boxers insist that rational decisions consider such entanglements, even if they seem to violate ordinary cause and effect. Game theorists frame Newcomb's paradox as a test between different decision principles. Causal decision theory follows the cue that your action can't cause past facts, so you two-box. Evidential decision theory treats your action as evidence about what the predictor already placed. So you one-box. Each theory yields different prescriptions, and neither resolves all intuitive objections to the other. In practical terms, Newcomb-style dilemmas appear in areas like contract law and reputation-driven markets. Suppose a company hires an agent, knowing that the agent's future decisions affect the company's willingness to invest. An agent who credibly commits to a long-term strategy can unlock larger investments, just as a one-boxer unlocks the million. If the agent trounces on commitments for immediate gain, future opportunities vanish. Thus, building a reputation of one-boxing can be more lucrative than taking short-term certainties. Psychologists testing Newcomb-like choices reveal that people's real-world behavior varies. When facing transparent predictions, say an AI grading their performance, some participants opt out of extra assignments, trusting that the AI will award higher marks. Others do every assignment available to secure baseline grades, disregarding the AI's predictive model. Such studies probe how much we trust external forecasts in our decision-making. In everyday life, we often face offers tied to our reputation: preferential loan rates for low-risk borrowers, premium rewards for loyal customers, or invitations reserved for consistent contributors. By choosing not to take the extra 1,000, people signal trustworthiness, unlocking greater long-term benefits. If we renege, those benefits dry up. Newcomb's paradox packages this dynamic into a stark theoretical choice. As you imagine the two boxes before you, consider your own decisions under forecasted conditions. Do you seize every immediate advantage, or do you sometimes forego small gains to demonstrate reliability, hoping for bigger rewards? Each breath in this moment is like choosing one box. Small sacrifice now could open the door to greater opportunity later. Breathe in the calm confidence of the one boxer. Breathe out the pull of immediate gain. Picture the opaque box in your mind, heavy with promise, untouched by fear. Let the tension between choice and prediction settle as you exhale. In the quiet between each breath, may you find clarity, comfortable with commitment, at peace with possibility, and ready for restful sleep.